Thank you, Commissioner Paxton.
Okay, we ready? Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. We have all three commissioners, our administrator, clerk of the board. I am going to call the meeting to order, and if everyone would please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, with that, we have a announcement here for a special meeting October 21st. It's a special meeting for an executive session with outside counsel. That'll be on October 21st in the chamber. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, October 31st and September 23rd. Is there a consensus on the minutes?
No change.
Commissioner Mullen. Okay, approval of minutes are done. Office business, we have vouchers.
Move for approval.
Got to turn it on, Rocky. Push it. There you go.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $846,262.34 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and the emergency management payroll in the total amount of $110,841.81 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Commissioner, excuse me. I think the number that reflected was the last key total rather than the grand total.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. The total amount is $1,276,043.22 as
Second.
presented.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 And I believe there's 14 items on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, request we remove item number 1 for separate discussion this evening.
So we're looking for approval from 2 to 14. A motion.
Was that your motion or?
That was a request to remove item 1. Mr. Chairman, move for approval of consent agenda items 2 through 14 as presented.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Discussion on item 1.
Mr. Johnson, I'm assuming you're down at the other end. There you are. I want to start by acknowledging, I think, the exemplary work of the coroner's office, the improvements that they've made in their vehicles and in their processes and their staffing, I think have been exemplary. My only real concern or desire to discuss this one separately is that I didn't see, and apologies if it's there, but I didn't see anything in the read aheads that told me where the roughly $80,000 of taxpayer money was going to come from.
It's a great question, and it apparently does not show that in the ASR. So the intent here was to use Rescue Act funds that we have received from the federal government as part of our COVID response to.
Okay, I think that's a perfect use for it and happy to support. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move for approval of Resolution 2021-217, formerly known as Item 1 on consent.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we'll go down to the Commissioner Administrator updates. Keith?
Well, I've been spending quite a bit of time on redistricting, which I know most of the public that's here tonight wants to hear a little bit of an update from our committee, so we'll present that shortly. Also continuing our review of potential projects and programs.
We've been working on the 22 budget and a discussion of annual assessments for each of the jurisdictions, including Franklin County, and a review of transportation improvement plan. I just note that while we pay assessments to the COG, that organization is what opens the door for us to be eligible for state and federal highway dollars. So while we may pay several thousand or more per year in membership, it opens the door for millions in road monies. Update meeting with the Grace Clinic leadership. We haven't talked about Grace Clinic a number of years, but they're in their 9th year. The clinic is prospering and serving the community very well. If anybody has any questions about that, please contact me outside of meeting. I'll be happy to fill you in. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Attended the Benton Franklin Transit meeting. Beginning November 1st, they'll start charging again for rides. I also, this past couple weeks, had an opportunity to tour the Wilson House, which will be coming up apparently for auction. If you're not familiar with the Wilson House, at one time it was a boarding house, and I believe it's occupied by not Lords, but whoever has taken over Lords, and they're the current renters. But if you're not familiar with it and you're interested, it will be coming up for sale. I believe it's going to be a great opportunity for someone to make that purchase. Long-term care exemptions need to be fulfilled as soon as possible. If you've already secured your long-term care insurance, you still need to file your exemption. Exemptions need to be in before the first of the year. If they don't have them back to you in time, then you will not be exempt the first quarter. I would suggest getting your exemption done as quickly as possible if that's the route that you're going to go, because they are saying that the website may be getting backlogged. It's a pretty simple process. I actually did mine today. It took me probably 5 minutes. Pretty simple process. Had the opportunity to listen to all 3 of the redistricting meetings. Was able to listen to all the public comments, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved in that. It's been, I believe, a great process. Also listened in on the local decision makers briefing today. As Brad said, the counts are down, but other than that, not a whole lot of new news on, as far as that goes. And that's my report of this past week.
Thank you. So I also attended the Ben Franklin Transit meeting and was pretty alarmed. If you heard the same, the $53 million budget's going to go up $9 million next year. So Ben Franklin Transit is going to be a $62 million budget. I also attended all three of the redistricting meetings in person because I think it's very important to see the individual speaking, their posture, their emotion. And I have to say that I was impressed with the turnout at MESA, especially 60 people. Other than that, it's been a slow week for me for meetings, so we'll continue on down with public comment. Now, this public comment period, please, we've got a open public hearing for redistricting. So public comments now on anything but redistricting, because we have the redistricting coming up. So the mic is open for public comment.
Where's the timer before I speak? The timer so you can monitor yourself? The timer at the courthouse, we have a timer so we can see when we get there. Sorry, I just want to make sure before I get started. Do let me know when it's time. Thank you, Jeffrey Robinson, proud resident of District 1 in Pasco. I come to you today for a non-redistricting comment, and that is that I am deeply dismayed and concerned by the conduct of this board during meetings. I have watched over the last few months as public officials, such as our county prosecutor, Sean Sant, have been bullied, had their competence questioned, been mercilessly attacked for every little thing they say and do. I've watched commissioners yell at each other. I've watched one particular commissioner cut people off in the middle of a public comment if they say something he doesn't agree with or doesn't like. And we are making national news. We're making statewide news. Franklin County, it seems, every Tuesday becomes the new thing to watch in the rest of Washington State. I've lived here for 35 years almost, and I have never seen anything like this, and it is embarrassing. It is unfortunate that we live in a time right now where it is okay for our county commissioners to belittle other public servants. I know it's funny, isn't it? It's really funny until you have to hear about it. Yeah, I am. I'm glad you're looking and talking back to me this time. You usually just shuffle your papers. But anyway, I'm good.
It's public comment. We're not supposed to speak when you're talking.
Well, you did. Anyway, so like I was saying, it's unfortunate the conduct that we see, and I hope our commissioners, one of them in particular, will consider changing their demeanor at these meetings, because it is embarrassing. It does have an impact on our credibility. And frankly, it is shameful to anyone who's actually lived in Franklin County for a while. This is not the Franklin County that I grew up in, and that is sad. Thank you.
I'm going to flip-flop mine. I applaud our county commissioners for not doing a get along to get along kind of meeting. I applaud our commissioners for standing up for the rights of Franklin County. I applaud our commissioners for calling out incompetence when they see it, or at least when they think they see it. It is our job to keep each other in check. Thank you.
He pretty much nailed it with that. But realistically, this crap needs to end. All this COVID bullshit, it's nothing, it's stupid.
Please don't use cuss words.
Sorry. It's ridiculous. There's, you know, it's hurting the kids, everything else. And it's, utter BS. It's stupid. You're watching, I mean, people losing their jobs over this. There's actually departments shutting down because they're doing, guess what? Enough. And you watch everyone, we're all together. Mask, no mask. Well, you're wearing your mask, you still transmit the stuff. You've been fully vaccinated, guess what? You can still get it. You can still end up in the hospital. It's all about money. That's all this is. And to watch, to go into the meetings and watch everyone going, well, yeah, start talking, and you're sitting right next to someone else to put it back up again. My gosh, it's ridiculous. But the school district thing is really screwed up. I mean, there's kids, you know, it's just screwing with them. They're kids. Let them be kids. I mean, if you're scared of it, really scared of it, stay home. Don't go to work. Collect the government's money. But if you want to take the money from the government, guess what? You're signing a deal with the devil. Thank you.
George Dockstetter, 4951 Self Landing Road. I think helping the coroner out with a meat wagon with the government money is one good way to spend it, but I'd like to know when we're going to have public meetings so everybody can put their 2 bits in how we're going to spend $9.5 million. That's a big chunk of money, and we need public comment and input, and hopefully it'll be at an evening meeting when majority of the people that do attend can make it without having to give up work. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. Couple of things. Thank you for having some night meetings when it works for us much better to be here. I would encourage you to continue doing so. I think that that's very helpful, and I think that the audience proves that it's helpful for the constituents that you serve. Next thing, there was a meeting today that was attended by several of our commissioners here, and during that meeting, Commissioner Peck asked someone in that meeting to contact the governor's office or something near to what I'm trying to describe, to have the governor's office look into the fact that our Commissioner Didier doesn't wear a mask in meetings. I think it's very sad and disheartening that we have one of our Franklin County commissioners, excuse me, trying to put a roadblock like that in front of another. Very disappointing for that to happen on that level. Very disappointing. Another thing that is gave me a very heavy heart for the last number of days since last week is the story of our state patrol, our police, our deputies, DOT workers, healthcare workers being fired in the state of Washington. The number reaches into the thousands. Our Washington State head football coach was fired today or yesterday, along with 4 assistant coaches. I attempted to find today the numbers from our school districts of how many of our school staff was fired because they decided that being vaccinated was not right for them or for their body. And yet we have tyranny happening here at home. We have a governor of our state that has decided he knows better for you than you know for you. And the foundation of our country was built on us being free and making decisions for ourselves. I don't know other than me saying this publicly that it's very disheartening, but hopefully together our voices can be heard that says we won't stand for this. If you look back in history, there's a saying that says if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it, and I think that's what we're seeing today. Very, very disheartening that our state electeds are not allowed to help make these decisions. The governor has decided that he will make them alone. And so I wanted that to be said very publicly, that it's sad to watch these people that have dedicated their lives to service of our state in whatever capacity, and they're being fired because they won't bow down to a tyrannical governor, Jay Inslee. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
My name is Steve Simmons. So it probably comes as no surprise, maybe it does. I'm actually a candidate for school board this year. And it just so happens I've been attending these meetings quite regularly. And last week, the school board talked about adopting a resolution to send to the governor's office to request that if there is going to be mandates, there's going to be anything of such like vaccine requirements or anything that is accomplished through a legislature, and then it comes through them and not through an executive action. And I would just ask maybe that it be possible that the Franklin County and the commissioners come to an agreement and be able to propose the same resolution to the governor, not saying that it would do anything, but that it would be a foot in the step in the right direction. And that would be something that I would like to see from this county and from you as commissioners. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move to the public hearing on redistricting. And at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing on redistricting. And first is the update from the Redistricting Committee, and I believe that'd be from the chairman.
I'll do it.
From you, Keith?
Yeah.
Okay.
You ready? Good. All right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you and good evening. I know many of you have already attended a couple of the public hearings that we've had on redistricting with our Redistricting Committee. I see most of the members of the committee here tonight. We, on behalf of the county, really appreciate their willingness to serve. It's not an easy job that they've got, and it's time consuming, but we appreciate their effort. Just to give you a brief update of where we are, we've had 3 public hearings so far. We had one here, we had one in Connell, and we had one in Mesa. All 3 relatively well attended. We are going to have at least one more public hearing. It's scheduled for November the 15th. It will be conducted primarily in Spanish, and it will take place at Virgie Robinson Elementary School on East Lewis Street in Pasco. There will be translators available for those that may not speak Spanish, including myself. So the process that we're going through has been flavored a little bit by a litigation that the county is a defendant in an action. That's the discussion that will take place with our attorneys on Thursday. I won't get into a lot of the detail. We've, I think, kind of hashed and rehashed a lot of the litigation issues, but the court recently overturned an earlier decision related to summary judgment that allows us as a county and the Committee on Redistricting to have a little more time to put together formal redistricting plans. And kind of the long-term view is that this committee will conduct these public hearings and receive input and comments from the public, and then take that information and meet as a committee to craft proposals to come before the Board of County Commissioners. Then the county commissioners will make a decision whether they accept one of those plans as the formal proposal for Franklin County. And then once that takes place, it will be brought back to the court for final endorsement by the judge. Because it's a matter of litigation, then that will be part of the decision. In these public hearings that we have been we've received a number of different ideas, as well as the committee members themselves have a number of different ideas. Right now, we have basically 4 proposals that we are considering. But let me be very clear that those are not final in any way. The committee is still continuing to evaluate some of the detailed numbers within precincts and the dividing lines and what they look like. So I'm going to show you the maps that are currently being considered. But as I said, these are not final, and it means we may have other proposals, very likely we'll have other proposals to consider in the next few weeks. Time frame, we're probably talking about the end of November before we get a proposal specific to the Board of Commissioners. So in front of you on the screen tonight, as you can see, that is the current commissioner districts. And you can see from the population numbers that we just received from the 2020 census that Commissioner District 3, which is on the west side of Franklin County, has 37,730 people, and Commissioner District 1 only has a little over 30,000. Commissioner District 2, almost 29,000. Part of the Washington laws regarding districting is that those 3 commissioner districts need to be relatively equal in number. They don't have to be precisely equal, but close enough that they meet a margin of fairness in terms of population equity between the 3 commissioner districts. So that is there are 2 things that are driving our decision to redistrict. One is it's state law that after we receive census information that we go through this process. But secondly, also that we balance those 3 districts so that they're equitable in number. So let me go on to the next slide. This is one proposal that the board, that the committee is considering, which would, if you look at the population numbers, make them relatively equal. About 32,922 in District 1, 860 in District 3. Would favor it, people that would oppose it. This is not the purpose of the meeting tonight to try to take any kind of a vote or get an opinion on which one's best or least favorite, but we encourage your comments and consideration of these proposals. Then the next option 2, it splits the North County into 2 districts, mostly along 395. But then it comes over and leaves Connell and Mesa and Colotis all in District 2. and that becomes necessary simply to balance the numbers. This would have 32,204 in District 1, 32,369 in District 2, and 32,176 in District 3. And I'll zoom in a little closer on the Pasco area. This comes largely up 20th Avenue and jumps over to Road 36, brings in just above the freeway, and then comes out to the Highway 182 with the river on the south. And East Pasco, Commissioner District 2 would bring in a lot of industrial area where there's really no population of people. And then from about 20th east would be contained in District 2. And District 3 would follow the freeway out 182 after a road that's 54, and jog up here to capture those. There's 3 precincts right in this area between Road 44 and Road 36 north of Sandifer. Proposed is a little more similar to the first one, but it does have some different lines. This follows the Columbia and the Snake Rivers. District 3 would certainly be a very large, mostly rural district, and Commissioner Districts 1 and 2 would be split into more of the urban area, again, kind of dividing Pasco along 395, but it brings District 2 all the way to 395 and brings District 1 further up the river, past Self-Lending, Columbia River Road, where it intersects with the Columbia River. And option 4, we heard quite a bit of input, particularly in Mies and Kyle, about the idea of doing kind of what we call a spoked or wagon wheel approach, where each district would have a significant rural representation as well as a significant urban representation. So those districts come all the way from the north part of the county clear down to the Columbia and Snake River on the southern border of the county. To zoom in a little closer for the downtown Pasco area, I should point out that the color coding of this option 4 is a little different. It's in all of the other maps, Commissioner District 2 is represented on the eastern side of the county in green. This is different because going left to right, it just makes the map easier to read. So don't read anything more into the colors than that. It's just to help you visualize the difference. So this splits it up, Road 54, and then comes out Road 68 all the way to Self-Landing. That would be District 1 on the far west. In the middle, it comes down Road 68 and jogs over to 54, over to 395 across the freeway, picks up some of that industrial area, and then goes north. And then District 3 captures most of East Pasco and follows the Snake River up the rest of the way to the north part of the county. That shows the Pasco. This map, we have now been able to color code. I don't know if that reads very well from that distance. Color code the demographic % Hispanic population density in Pasco. And you can see that East Pasco has a much higher concentration of Hispanic population than west, or the further north and west that you go, it is not as concentrated. Each of these precincts, we have the data of Hispanic and non-Hispanic populations for, and that's been put into the map. We're using that as a guide to help us know how to kind of respond to the litigation. The primary claim of the litigation is that Latino populations have been underrepresented in county commissioner races, and so paying attention to the demographics and the concentration of Latino voters is going to be important to us as we move forward. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we are right now. But as I said, we've still got a ways to go. We've got some time to do it, but the committee is meeting to discuss ideas and to input data. We've gotten help from outside demographers to make sure that we're following the requirements that we will anticipate having to meet in our litigation strategy, and creating a district map that is equitable and meets the requirements of the Washington Voting Rights Act. So I'll probably stop there and be glad to respond to questions as you have them. I know there's a few folks here that want to offer some additional public input. I see a number of you that have attended our public hearings and have participated. That's appreciated and it's necessary. The committee can only be as good as the input that they receive. So I'll maybe stop there and pause for questions.
So we'll open the mic up for public comment. If anybody has public comment, please come forward.
Jeffrey Robinson, I couldn't help myself. I looked at all of the maps, and to be brutally honest, I'm not entirely certain what we're even doing here, considering that the court is going to decide this issue regardless of how the commissioners vote. But since we are here, the only legally safe and sound map that I saw was the first map we were presented with. And setting aside the demographic issues if you go with a different map, which would be gerrymandering if you know that you're violating the law, the reality is that when Pasco has 80% of the population and the majority of the taxpayers in a county, the idea that it doesn't deserve two contained districts and two contained commissioners on this commission is equivalent to taxation without representation. So you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. I think you need to go with the first map that was presented to us, the one that gives Pasco two districts, both because it complies with the Voting Rights Act, and I think you need to go with it because if you don't, you are disenfranchising the people of Pasco. You are diluting our voice as a city, and you are disrespecting us. Thank you.
I've been sitting too long. I'm sorry about that. Almost fell down. If I understand right, you're really trying to redistrict because you're forced to do that. It's the law. Is that correct?
We do have a state law that requires us to redistrict every time there's a census taken. And then there's options to redistrict no more often than every 4 years. But we are also going through this process as a result of this litigation that's been filed that our current districts are not in compliance with the Washington Voting Rights Act. That is the claim of the plaintiffs. Okay. And so we are responding to that.
And the existing districting shows there's an unequal population in those three districts, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it within the tolerances?
No.
Okay. So you're forced to do this?
Yes.
Correct? Regardless of the lawsuit?
Correct. Okay. We would be doing this exercise independent of the lawsuit.
Okay. The only thing I was going to at least offer, my immediate neighbor to my west, who we share property lines, is Hispanic. My neighbor across the street to the south is Hispanic. If I look east out my front door, I have 6 neighbors who are Hispanic. I was really pleased to see that indeed you've taken that into consideration. And that's pretty evident that there's Hispanics throughout our whole community. I'm not sure how you're planning on carving out a Hispanic commissioner, how that's going to work in anything that you do. But if you were to do something of that spoke wheel, in other words, take the density of our population, which is 80% in Pasco, and divide that into thirds, at least you have some semblance of representing Hispanics throughout all 3 commissioners. And indeed, if the population in East Pasco, which certainly overwhelms the population of, if you will, North Franklin County, I think it really depends on how many of those of that population want to vote for who is presented to them. I mean, I'm not a wizard at this stuff, but certainly It really seems that if you want to represent somebody in the existing law that you have, that dividing Pasco into thirds would be one option. The other thing I would share with you is to have a total of 5 commissioners, and somehow, some way, make it so that you can have a Hispanic representative. I'm not sure how that would look or how you would do that, but if that's the goal, then let's make it the goal. We need a Hispanic representation here, maybe an ad hoc, at large, whatever, but you'd have 5 commissioners and an opportunity to actually force the issue. From what I can see as far as the school board and maybe especially the Pasco City Council and the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, they're not underrepresented. That's what I have to offer for you. Thank you.
John Logue, East of Washington. At all 3 district meetings, the same question was asked and left unanswered. Number 1 was, what is the Latino population in Franklin County, and what is the Caucasian population in Franklin County? I came prepared to answer those questions and share those with the group. Franklin County's total 95,222 residents. The Latino population is 51,039, or 53.6%, which leaves me astonished that we can't get a Latino elected to the Commissioners Board. Caucasians, there are 37,994, or 39.9%. There's other statistics to take into consideration that may be found as astonishing. Of the 5,545 residents in Connell, 2,600 or 46.9% are Latino. Mesa's population of 385 contains 76.1% Latino, or 292 Latino residents. 11% of the Latino population lies in those 2 communities. 2 of the proposed maps would cut those people off from their brothers and sisters in Pasco, Washington. Are they held with the same disdain as the rest of the rural residents? I have serious questions regarding the motives behind any proposal that sets 2 districts completely inside city limits. Are the votes of our rural Latinos less important? And is this just a ploy to create an unfair playing field to get Democrats elected under the false pretense of social justice? One of the Redistricting Committee members made an inflammatory remark about farmers not being protected class. Neither is the Democrat Party. I caution the board to choose wisely. In a nation with the heritage of equal representation, do you wish to disenfranchise Franklin County's rural population the way King County has Eastern Washington? Regardless of skin tone, all people deserve equal representation.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you about this challenge we have in Franklin County right now. Would you bring up map 2, please? Would you zoom in one piece on that? So I just wanted to offer a couple of things for you commissioners for your consideration. As you know, I'm a developer here in town, primarily developing private single-family lots and multifamily lots for residences, and I wanted to share a couple of things for your consideration. This map and map number 1, which is relatively similar as far as what I have to share with you, would do something that I think would have unintended consequences. And what that is a large portion of the growth that is going to happen in Pasco in the next 6 or so years, plus or minus, is going to happen in this map. It'll be 90+% of that growth will be inside of District 3. And map number 1 is relatively similar as far as the land area. And so what I would like to have you consider is that I think if we do this process and we do it well, it would allow for this not to be an issue 3 or 4 years from now. So in the next number of years, there's a very real possibility that there will be, you know, maybe up to 10,000 new residences in Pasco. And if we were to do that and all of that was inside of District 3, as this map shows, then we would be right back to the place we are today, out of compliance with state law, of having districts that are fairly similar in population. And so I think that if you would consider that, I think that it could help us not have the same problem down the road. The wagon wheel spoke, as it was talked about earlier. Would you please go to that map? I think that it allows for a more even and uniform representation. It allows farmers to have multiple people that represent them, as well as the people in town and the suburban area to have multiple representation. Not that we can't call any of our commissioners at any time, because they do represent the county, but I think this gives a more even representation. As far as what appears to be the issue that we've been talking about for quite some time is, and I've looked into this and I've asked a lot, and so this is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we're talking about is, most of the people that I've heard, I was at all 3 of the meetings that we had this last week, and the people that I heard would like to have equality. It appears that the goal from the lawsuit is equity, and how my understanding of the definition of the two is equity is guarantees an even outcome. And I believe that the residents would like to have an even opportunity. Everybody has the same opportunity, and everybody has the same chance to run for office or do it in that way. Guaranteeing the same outcome is like everybody getting a participation trophy when you play the game, whatever the game might be. And I don't think that everybody getting a participation trophy is healthy for our society, and I don't think that that's the direction that we as a society want our future to look like. So we've talked about the Hispanic population being disenfranchised, and when they're well over 50% of the population, the Caucasian is the next as far as the percentage. So when the Hispanic population of the county is over 53% and the Caucasian population of the county is less than 40%, that's 13% difference. And so when that's the closest number that you have for comparison, I don't think that it matters where you draw the lines, because it's a majority of the county. So I'm not saying I'm right, but some of my thoughts that I think that could be good for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Kurt Didier. Unlike a lot of people get up here and say they've been here 35 years, 25 years, 40 years, I'm a lifer. Born here, raised here, 99% sure I'll be planted here in this county, okay? Everybody has their belief, everybody has their opinion how this should be divided up. There's a number of facts. Number one is this should have been started back in 2016 because our numbers were out of whack then. And it's been put off for 5 years. So I can't really blame the commissioners up here. The ones previous to this group here are the ones that should address this a long time ago, number one. All right, number two, there's a comment about District 1 or Map 1 is the best. That's somebody's opinion, okay? The gentleman previous to me said this map's the best because it gives everybody equal opportunity inside of town and outside of town to run and represent their county the way they see fit or best, number one. Number two, the first gentleman said a lot of taxes are collected inside of Pasco. That's correct. I've seen no deal. The point of the matter is that the majority of the money is not spent inside of Pasco. According to Mr. Johnson, most of it, around 70%, if I'm not wrong, somewhere in there, you don't have the exact figure, is spent outside of the city of Pasco. So I don't understand why you feel somebody inside of Pasco should tell us how the money that's being spent out in our area for sheriff's, roads department, and things like that, okay? This gives everybody an equal opportunity to run, to be representative, okay? I guess the next thing I really have an issue with is some of the things like they're saying fighting amongst everybody, because this is not a fight. It is, but it ain't. And people are filing lawsuits based on, because they're not happy because they didn't get elected. Plain and simple. That's all it is. If you're the best candidate, you run a great campaign, you'll get elected. Okay? And I talked to Mr. Johnson beforehand, and there's another part to this whole redistricting and things that people don't understand. And that is, some people want district-only voting even in the general. I don't know how many people are aware of that. I've Googled most every county. There's 39 counties in the state. 32 of them have county commissioners. There are actually 7 that do not. Their deal is totally different. The Constitution of the state of Washington says that you can have at-large voting. Almost every county of the 32 has at-large voting for their commissioners. Mr. Johnson, before the meeting, I was talking to him, he thought Yakima had individual districts. They don't. They don't. Google it. They're still at large, just like every other one. So this deal of just the district itself electing this person, I don't feel is fair and right, and it sure don't follow the norm in our state. So I think we better leave that part alone. Just throw that out the window and leave it alone, because that's the way it's been. I feel that's the way it should be, regardless how we end up drawing lines. Thank you.
I too agree with number 4. I like representation of each commissioner representing the county, the farmers, and I also want them representing the people in the city. The only thing I think is, if I see it right, number 2 is, as the way it stands right now, is going to stand for the most growth, I believe, if I'm seeing it right, with that urban growth area out there by just this side of the Clark addition there, where the new urban growth area is going to be. So maybe taking District 3 and tweaking it a little bit more in city there to have a little more representation, knowing that number 2 is going to have more growth. But we on this side of the state should be more than anybody knowing we want everyone's voice heard. Someone said it earlier that when we vote, we know that King County is going to just obliterate our word over here. So we should take that in consideration, make sure that everybody's word and opinion is heard over here. I think the board, I think the districting committee, I mean, they've got a heavy job to do. And I hope it doesn't come down to a judge deciding how we as a county feel. So my opinion would be like this one right here. Thank you.
I actually was not going to say anything, But then I heard that we're making national news, and I'm like, this is kind of exciting. I didn't know that. So maybe I can say something to really propel us out there. One thing that I do like this map. One thing that I noticed about map number 1 is that Commissioner District 1 was mostly Caucasian, and I kind of think that might be a little bit prejudiced. So I really think that we need to think about that. The other thing is that I went back and I looked on the auditor's website, anyone can do that, as back as far as you can, and we've only had one Hispanic person run for commissioner that I could see, unless it, happened before I was born. And so I know it's frustrating to lose, and I feel bad about that. I wish everyone could win. But the truth is that we have a treasurer who is Latina, and she has won 3 times. I think she beat out an incumbent that was Caucasian. So I think of Franklin County as a melting pot. That's why I chose to live here. I actually chose to go to high school because I was going to high school in Kennewick, and I have 2 Black sisters. And there was only one girl at my elementary school that was African American. And so I chose to go over to Pasco Schools because my mother was working for the school district at the time. And so I was just excited that I went over there. Me and my sisters, all 3 of us ended up going to Pasco High and graduating, and had a wonderful time because we were like a family, and it didn't care. I mean, nobody cared about what ethnicity you might be or not. It was just America. And that's what's so great about America. And I look at my family, I mean, my son-in-law, my sister-in-law, just everybody. It's just a rainbow, and that's the way it should be. And I think that by separating ourselves off, that's harmful to your children. We want it to grow and to blend. That's what makes America great. That's what makes Franklin County great. And I just hope that we can all respect what it is that our commissioners end up voting for. And I hope that we never section ourselves off to a white commissioner district. That part is the most offensive. Thank you.
Ismael Mendoza, political science student at CDC Pasco. I do not like map number 4 because it basically does the same thing as the beginning. It separates the communities in ways that it will be called cracking, because you have one community and you crack it into different sections in order to fit the desired result on your elections. So I think that one doesn't look anything like whatever the allegation should require, because they're supposed to be in the same interest. And if you take a drive to Misa, you will notice that there's a long drive. So there's, interests that break apart from rural and city residents. It's not the same. It's a little different, and, I do not have a favorite in maps yet, but I like the one where East Pasco looks a little bigger, because I am aware of the girl of East Pasco. So I would also like to remind the board the number that is to work with is the results of the 2020 census. There shall be growth, right? And it is encouraged. That's where investments are done in the city. And those numbers, even though look tempting to use, but you cannot use those numbers because those are speculations of growth. So the one number the board needs to look around is the 2020 census, and that's it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm always so short for this. My name is Sharon Alfaro. I'm a resident in Pasco. been so since I was like 5. First, I'd like to remind everyone that discrimination in our area is both overt and covert. And second of all, we would like to keep East Pasco to remain whole while also creating an East Pasco district. Meaning to please choose the map number 1 as is the most accurate to legal requirements. Thank you.
Good evening, Jake Dorsey from Pasco. As I spoke at the Pasco Redistricting Committee meeting before, option 1 looked like the one that met with state law the most. The other maps are maps that appear to have been made from good ideals and great passion, and I can respect that a lot. A judge won't, and that concerns me a lot. We're a nation of laws. We have to follow the law, and the law was made in 2018. We lost it then. We don't get to fight it now. I mean, we could try in court. I guess that's what we're doing now, but the Voting Rights Act passed. It passed with a majority. It's been law for 3 years. The districts that we have now wouldn't be supported under the VRA. Option 4 here wouldn't be supported under the VRA. It breaks up communities of interest. It clearly isn't establishing the protected class district that is called for. We don't have to like it. I understand that a lot of people don't like it, and people in the county don't want to have to be subjected to everything that Pasco wants all the time. And I wouldn't want to do that to them. At the same time, that's the law. The law wasn't meant for Franklin County's northern areas to, be, I guess, fully or fairly represented how they would like. That's not what the law was about. I understand, yeah, but that's not what the law was about. The law was about protecting a district, basically like East Pasco, and for not doing this big wheel spoke thing that breaks up the city into 3. It's inconvenient that Pasco is at the bottom, and it makes redistricting really hard. I can understand that. Again, that's just not what the law allows for. Thank you.
I apologize for my word earlier. Anyhow, I don't care what color you are. It doesn't matter. You know what? Whoever you vote for should represent you. I don't care who you are. Anyhow, do you want equality, equity, whatever? I don't care what the damn law, or I don't care what the law says. Then North Franklin, someone up middle of nowhere should be able to have a voice also, not just the city. If we go with that, the law thing, it's going to be exactly like Seattle, just steamrolling us, telling us they can to do whatever they want us to do. No, ain't happening, because people are going to get really sick of this stuff. In other counties, that ain't going to fly. Here, it's kind of a liberal. Yeah, never mind. But in some counties, it is going to come down to bloodshed, and we don't want this here.
Equal representation. That is what our country was formed with. That's why we have the Electoral College in presidential elections. That's why we have the House of Representatives and the Senate set up the way they are. It is to provide equal representation for all people in the United States. That being said, I want to switch gears just a little bit. And regardless of what option which map is chosen, I think after redistricting, we need to move on a new path. And that is encouraging more Latino voters to get involved in our election process. Be that through teaching English, teaching Spanish to the people that don't. You know, sociology teacher had a joke when I was in college. Do you know what you call somebody who only speaks one language? An American. So I think the burden falls on all of us to learn a second language that pertains to our environment. And right now, you know, for white people, that's Spanish. For Latinos, that's English. And I think that would bring a lot more community togetherness. We need to welcome the Latino community into our community and form a community. This discussion of we want our representation, we shouldn't be having this. Not in 2021. We need to find ways to become more cohesive as a community. There was another thought and I lost it. Maybe I'll share it next Tuesday. Thanks.
Gabriel Portugal. I'd like to thank you because today this hearing or this has been with less interaction between the audience and we are addressing you. That is good. It is preventing us from engaging in sides conversations and sometimes disagreements. Thank you for doing that for us. So I would like to share with you an observation about Latino voters and non-Latino voters. And I invite you to think about how large groups behave. Imagine collective behavior patterns. Most of the people who are here, and then probably I did not attend the MESA hearing, but I can probably predict that in the previous hearings, mostly of these folks, if you look at the attendance here, we don't have the representation of the 54% of Latinos we say we have in the county, right? You can see that we're not here. But most of the people that you hear testimonies in previous hearings, they're Main Street folks who are familiar with voting. They understand the privilege of voting. Not only they understand the privilege of voting, but they also understand that they have the freedom to speak. They speak up their minds about candidates, initiatives of their choice. Most of them have voted in many elections. Most of them have relatives and friends that also have privilege of voting. Now let's take time to think about the Latino voter. And remember, we're looking at collective behavior. Let's not personalize, oh, I have a friend that does this, and let's just think about the whole big picture. The privilege of voting make Latinos a bit nervous. When they listen to animosity comments, and the voting creates animosity itself. And sometimes they experience hostility. Sometimes they're attacked, call names, go back where you came from. Imagine Latinos listening to this toxic language. A city council candidate in our neighboring city, he ran his campaign making incendiary statements about immigrants. Luckily, he didn't make it, but he made really bad statements about us, immigrants and non-immigrants, Latinos. So many Latinos do not feel safe attending these hearings. That's why they're not here. Why? Because before you can exercise the privilege of voting, you must feel free and safe. Feel free of fear. So I ask you not to personalize like the example that I'm drawing here in the differences between Latino voters compared to non-Latino voters. Think about in general terms. You may be thinking about an individual experiences where a Latino does understand and it is not afraid to exercise their vote, but that's not what we're talking about. We're looking at collective behavior. So these are some of the reasons most Latinos will not come to testify in a hearing. So when you're gathering all this data and look at the attendance and the comments, think about that Latinos are not here because of the fear factor. Well, sometimes some Latinos work for people that are testifying here. And if they have opposing views, you think they're going to come and voice their opinions? They are not. They want to protect their family. They want to protect their jobs. So that's why they're not here. So in closing, 2/3 of the Franklin County taxpayer population live in the city of Pasco. Someone said something about thirds, and I think this applies. 2/3 of Franklin County live in the city of Pasco, more or less. 1/3 lives in the northern part. The Washington State Voting Rights Act gives us the opportunity to make voting fair for everyone. So let's make it possible for 1/3 of the population living on the north of the county to have one commissioner, and 2/3 of the population living in the city of Pasco to be fairly represented with 2 commissioners. I am really positive this will be the best formula to comply with the Washington Voters' Rights Act. If you look at that map, that is not ever gonna be approved by the WVRA of 2018. Because look at that, it makes 3 commissioners all from the north. Because again, who's gonna run for commissioners? Those that are on the north mostly. Maybe some from the city of Pasco, but mostly right there you are creating 3 commissioners, so that WVRA is gonna not accept that one. That is not acceptable. Number 1 is a closer. So I am just making this analogy of the thirds, of the 1/3 and 2/3, so that when you look at your maps, you can consider this suggestion. But in the end, someone said, the judge will say that because if we don't want to comply with the law, someone is going to make us comply with the law. What happens when we drive fast? Someone has to make you comply with the law. You're not wearing your seatbelt. Somebody's going to make you comply with the law. So that's why we have the law of the Washington Voters' Rights Act. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mi esposo habló español muy bien, pero él es al trabajo esta noche. But he speaks with people that are Hispanic, and he asks them, why don't you register to vote? Why don't you vote? And they're not afraid of people. They don't want to be bothered by the government. That's why. And that's speaking as a collective. Now, I'm sure there's individual stories this gentleman has that may differ with that, but that's the communication that was given to my husband. And the truth of the matter is there's not a lot of population on this map in the northern property, but what it does is it gives that side of Pasco the opportunity to grow. And that's important, unless you just think that you're going to just stay so contained. What's going to happen, and I would like you to really think about this, is because the other 2 areas are growing. I was out doing flyers, and there are so many building projects going in both the Commissioner 1 and 2 districts right now. They're going to outnumber what's in East Pasco in just a couple of years. And you're not going to have any opportunity to grow because you're going to be so boxed in. And I just want you to think about that. So We are not here to keep Latinos from running for anything. We want you to. We love America, and we love everybody to have the opportunity. And to say that I wouldn't vote for someone because of their heritage or their ethnicity is offensive to me. So we need to understand that everybody has the opportunity to get other people registered to vote. And I would say that if you are in that part of the city and you feel like they're not getting registered to vote, it's your job to go out there and get them registered to vote if they can. And there are some that can't. And I should hope that you don't encourage people that are not allowed to vote to register, because if they then try to apply for citizenship, they won't be qualified because it's federal law, and that would be harmful to them. So we want them to become citizens. We want them to take the steps, and we want people to exercise their right, and everybody get equal representation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Jimenez, and like I've said in previous meetings, I'm a lifelong resident of Franklin County. I'm old enough to be born in when it was called Our Lady of Lourdes, and went to Pasco, like I said at previous meetings, went and graduated from Pasco High, born and raised out in the rural part, the country part of Franklin County. So to me, the entire county is my home, not just the city, not just the country, the whole county, every bit of it. Actually, I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight. My main thing is just to point out, I agree with option 4. That seems like fair, equitable representation. I have never heard of the concept of cracking ever in my entire life. This looks good to me, and I think it'll work. The only other comment I want to say is I think it's a little interesting hearing people talk about East Pasco because before my lifetime, before I was born, the demographic was dramatically different over there. This has been an evolution. East Pasco has changed. All of Pasco has changed. And what we really should be looking for is the future, which everybody in this room should know. District 1, 2, lots of growth, residential, commercial, and so on. Our demographic change will probably keep on changing and evolving as well. That is all. Thank you.
Steve Simmons, a resident of Pasco. So I have to agree with what James said there and what's been said about map 4. We have to look at the future of our county. And I see a lot of industry moving into the eastern side and a lot of the growth happening in the other 2 districts on the up north, heading north and to the west. And so I have to agree that I think this map best represents the future of our county. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Kent McMullen. I'd like to point out one thing, regardless of what option there is. One thing that surprises me in this map, on this option 4 in particular, just as an example, most of the growth is going up the Columbia River and heading up north along the river corridor. So if we're going to get districts that hold up as long as possible to the next census in 2030. If almost a 5% disparity, deviation is allowed between districts, it would seem that that district would want it to be the one that would be the lowest in numbers by almost 5%, because that's where the growth is going to occur. And the other districts, you know, based on population growth, can be set accordingly, mid-range and a higher population if there's less growth on I can't see the numbers from here, but the Far East District. And so when you start out with a new scenario where the numbers are equally balanced, it will quickly become out of balance. Within another 4 years, you might be addressing this issue again. So it would look to me that the numbers ought to be skewed according to the ongoing growth patterns at that time that we're seeing now. Thank you.
Is there any more public comment?
We'll always try to think a little bit outside the box. Maybe it shakes people up, gets you thinking. But historically, you know, last time I did that, I scared myself. Hello. So, the thing about this country, you know, the history of the country, you know, Pilgrims, the whole thing. And then they got a Congress established and a Senate, and they had a population. Well, the population back then in the United States was an awful lot smaller than it is today, by and large. It's huge today compared to what it was back in 1776 and thereafter. But here's the problem that I have with all this stuff. Over time, our Congress, which is made up of 435 congressmen and 100 senators, and we expanded the population of the whole United States to this huge number of 330 million people, but that little clique is still the same size. So in my lifetime of almost 70 years, I'm just getting squeezed out further and further and further and further and further. Let's put this over in China. They got 1.3 billion people. We got 435 congressmen and 100 senators. Do you think anybody over there is going to feel like they're represented? They're not going to feel representative. And if there's people that say they don't want to be a part of the process, well, that's what happens when you get huge populations and you don't increase the size of the representative. My point is, if we really wanted a representative government in this country, the Congress wouldn't be 435. It'd probably be about 5,000 if you want real representative government. Because when you take 330 million people and divide it by 500 senators and congressmen, well, that's only 660,000 people each that they get to represent, soon to become 1 million. The other point is this, is people come into this country, and we all know, let's call it what it really is, people are coming into this country illegally, and they all want the same thing. They don't like being in countries that have dictators and mandates and all this other communist junk. They come here for freedom. Well, they come here for freedom, but when they come in illegally, who's their representative? I mean, how many hundreds of thousands or millions of people have come into this country illegally? They're not documented in any form or fashion, but who's their representative? Do they have one? Are we going to acknowledge they need one? Or are we going to shun them out and saying they don't get one? I mean, there's some big sticky issues here that have cropped up over time. For me, I feel like, I had a pretty good life. But as I'm getting older, I'm getting further and further and further away from feeling like I have any representation anywhere. And you can look at me and tell me what I'm made out of, who I am. The character of a man matters. Doesn't matter about his color or his religion and all this other stuff. It's his character. We should be shooting for character. If you have a person up there that is an elected official that can do nothing but lie, cheat, and steal, he doesn't have any character. And we all know they're out there. If I were fresh to this country and walked in and looked and understood at the total corruption and trash that's being pushed in our face every day, and it's getting worse and worse recently. Am I up on my 3 minutes? I don't want to have, Have I hit the 3 minutes? Oh, well, you should have yelled at me. We need a green light up here or something. Really, something. But I'll just finish with that. If I were to walk in here and look at all this junk that's going on, I wouldn't want to vote either. Be honest about it. I say this is the most bogus, bunked up system. I'll go talk to my neighbors. I'll go talk to my friends. I'll lock arms with somebody that's like-minded, but I ain't talking to any of these creeps that don't represent me, because they don't. They represent themselves. They represent the hand that feeds them. The corporation, the bank, the Wall Street. They don't represent a man out here in Pasco that's doing labor. They don't care about him any more than they cared about me when I did labor. There's nothing there to care about. It's about them and what's above them. And if there's any division here in Pasco, I say stop it. The division doesn't need to exist. And it'll go away quickly when people finally look up and they say, wait a minute, who's telling me who to hate? Who's telling me what to think? Who's telling me what to believe? There's your enemies. They're not down here. Not at all. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I forgot.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, it says commissioner discussion. Oh, excuse me, I didn't see you get up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jessica Infante Castro. I am born in Pasco, raised in North Franklin School District. And yes, is that better? Awesome. So my name is Jessica Infante Castro. Like I said, born in Pasco, went to school in North Franklin School District, and I get the privilege to work in the district that I went to school with. And I'm here because I got to hear the meeting that was held in Mesa online. I got to hear the recording, and somebody mentioned, where are the Latinos, right? And we are here. We might not be fully represented in the percentages that we are, but we are here and we are trying to impact our community. And one of the hardships or obstacles that I see is language and potentially communication. And so my father is a U.S. citizen, and he is sitting here today, and he's probably trying his very best to understand as much as he can, but knowing that his English is limited. And so I'm here to represent him and to represent myself. And I want to trust that any of our commissioners are individuals who are, doesn't matter if they are Hispanic or non-Hispanic, that they're willing to talk and hear the voices of everyone. So I would invite you to go to the different areas of our community and ask us what we would like, what we need. And somebody mentioned about having additional commissioners to potentially have more voices. And if that could be an option, I would be for that. I just hope that out of this, we can come out stronger as a community and help each other grow. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for your time.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, next on the agenda is commissioner discussion. Commissioners.
Not sure exactly what discussion we're going to have tonight when everything hasn't been heard yet. But I do want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I want to thank you for coming and expressing your thoughts, your concerns, and your ideas. I'm the newest commissioner up here. I am a lifelong resident of Franklin County. I guess one of the things that bothers me the most, if you want to hear my own personal thoughts, are who decides who is the candidate of choice for the Latino community. It really bothers me to say that I can't represent someone because of the color of my skin. My own personal life, my first wife was from Mexico City, and I went through the immigration process to come here to the United States to get her here legally. It seems like a lot of this has been based on the election of my candidacy, the election that I won. I did win the primary, running against 2 other Republicans and 1 Democrat. So the thought of going to district-only voting, in my case, with my race, it wouldn't have made any difference because I won the primary, which was district-only, and I also won the general. It bothers me to say when I read through some of the documents that read that the last Latino choice candidate was Neva Corcoran. So because of the color of my skin being the same as hers, why am I not able to represent in some people's thoughts and minds? Neva actually was my brother's mother-in-law. She's like family to me. So it does bother me when I hear these things saying that that I cannot be representative of the Latino community. I was actually endorsed by the Hispanic newspaper here in Pasco, not only in 2020, but also in 2016. To me, that would indicate that I was the choice of the Latino community. Maybe not entirely, but you know, no election is perfect. Nothing in this life is perfect. You have to work hard for what you want, and I would like to feel that I represent the county to make it equal opportunity for everyone who wants to work hard to achieve the things that they want to, and make it fair and equitable for all. That's my thoughts.
So a couple of observations. There's been a lot of discussion about city versus county, how much money is collected from the residents of the city and spent in the county, whether or not people from the North County could get elected with compact districts, which coincidentally are required by the law. I think to suggest that you cannot live in the city and fully represent rural interests is a false precept.
I'll just name a few of the people that live in my district, District 1. You might recognize a few of them as people whose credentials in the farm community I think would make them capable of representing the North County farm interest. People like Frank Teagues, maybe. I think Frank's probably pretty qualified in that arena. Maybe James Alford from the Alford family and from the Farm Bureau. Mr. McMullen, living here in the front row, farmed in North County for, I don't know, 20, 30 years before moving into my district. There are lots of people who live in the city that can represent farm interests, and there are lots of people who live in the North County who could represent city interests. And to draw a division between the two, I think disrespects the fact that we have a lot of ag, farm, North County, rural, capable leaders in the city. Second thing I'd point out is that every single inch of the city of Pasco is part of Franklin County. Every single inch of it. And to act like it's not, and that county positions should only go, or as much as possible, should only go to people who live outside the city limits, my view is absurd. The suggestion that even though 80% of the people of Franklin County live in the city, and likely 80% of the revenues that the county has to spend are collected from those people in the city through property taxes and sales taxes, even though 80% of money is drawn from them, because it's going to be spent in North County, you really think that you should have a greater say, you, the folks that reside in North County, should have a greater say than the people from whom those taxes were drawn? Absurd, at least in my view. If you remember that every inch of Pasco and Mesa and Colotis and Connell, they're all part of Franklin County. And this notion of dividing us between city and rural areas is counterproductive, and it's a false precept. And to think otherwise, or to argue otherwise, you would have to say that the Frank Teagues and the James Alfords and the Kent McMullen and many others are not qualified to represent North County. On a personal note, when I became a commissioner, one of the very first things that somebody brought to me was that the cattlemen were having trouble getting insurance because of an ancient concept of open range in the North County. And this kid, who knew nothing about cattle and very little about farming and was happy to admit it, was the guy who in about 30 days took Title 16 of the state code, wrote a 1.5-page resolution and changed Franklin County into a range area county and solved that problem that had been in the books for several years. I'm not trying to tout my resume. I'm just pointing out that just because you live in the city doesn't mean you can't read a statute and fix a problem. And just because you live in the North County doesn't mean you can't solve problems in the city. Every inch of this place is part of Franklin County. Thank you.
80% of the people live in the city. That map number 4 would be the opportunity for every member to be elected from the city. There's the voting populace. This county was formed and created, and it had distinct lines between the irrigated land, the dry land, and the city at the time. To say that you're going to get equal representation by boxing in and creating a barrier around a class of people due to ethnicity is wrong. It's racist. My son-in-law is Eladio Castillo. He's blessed me with 2 grandchildren that are half Latino. If anybody touches those kids, I wouldn't want to tell you what I'll do to them. This is America. We're a melting pot. For this discussion to even be brought up inflames me, because Franklin County is special. I want Franklin County to come back together as a community. Quit segregating this county to get a Democrat elected, because that's what it's all about. It isn't about race. I've went through the last 20 years, every election. I looked at every name that ran in the primary and every name that went into the general. There's only been one Latino. She was a Democrat. Her message was poor. It wasn't uniting. And I tell you what, we're to this point over one race. We got to stop this nonsense. I don't care what lawsuit, what they're going to come at us with. If we stick together as a community, they won't beat us. But if you want to divide us and you want us to fight amongst one another, they will. I look forward to more comments in the future. Thank you. And with that, I believe we have public comment.
You know who I am, but I'll say it again to make sure it gets on the record. Jeffrey Robinson. You know what inflames me? What inflames me is the idea that somehow not following the law is a good thing. What inflames me is the idea that demanding civility at a commission meeting is somehow a personal attack. What inflames me is watching public officials who don't necessarily agree with some of us targeted and treated like crap in a meeting. What inflames me is the idea that at one minute we can say the rules say one thing and then the other, we can interrupt a community member while they are speaking and say, "Oh, are you talking to me?" That's kind of inflaming too. It's also kind of inflaming to me the idea that the Latinx community, or excuse me, Latino community, is in some way wrong to ask for fair and equitable representation like the people who brought the lawsuit. That's inflaming to me. You're right. Franklin County is an extraordinary, wonderful, godly, special place, the kind of place where we should all be proud to live. But until we have fair and equitable voting systems, until we make sure that we create districts that respect everyone and follow the law, we are losing our ability and our God-given right to live up to our full potential. And that is what inflames me. And that is why I come here every chance I get to give comment, even though a few days ago my cousin who was my age died and it hurts like hell to even stand here at this podium right now. That is what inflames me. Thank you.
Thank you again, Commissioners, for the opportunity. Two things. Back to talking about representation of the county. One of the reasons that I want Franklin County represented by at least two commissioners in the rural area is not to, it literally never crossed my mind so that we could have two commissioners that come from North County. That literally never crossed my mind until somebody else pointed that out, saying that that was the reason that we wanted that wagon wheel shaped district. That hadn't crossed my mind. Apparently I'm not sharp enough to think that deep into it. But on that vein, it does give the opportunity for the city of Pasco to have three commissioners elected from inside the city limits of Pasco. And yes, it is all Franklin County. The reason I would like to have a number of representatives to represent North Franklin County is because that is where approximately 80% of our tax money is spent as Franklin County. And I would like to have more than one commissioner to be the ones that help to make the decisions on how that tax money is actually spent. I would prefer to not have one commissioner bear the weight of that. And do actually think that somebody from inside the city limits can represent somebody out in the country, but I believe that it's more fair and to have representation that represents and their district covers both rural and the city. So disappoints me that people would believe otherwise as far as the motives are concerned. Another thing is I spoke earlier and I've been researching. So more than 125 of our local health professionals lost their job yesterday. And that weighs heavy on my heart. I was in the hospital a year ago at about this time, and I'm very thankful for our medical professionals. I nearly lost my wife a number of years ago, and I'm very thankful for our medical professionals. And for approximately 5 years, I carry a challenge coin in my pocket for a different reason than most people carry one. The reason I carry one for almost 10 years now is to remind me every day to be thankful for those that have served our country and those that continue to serve. And there's a picture that brought tears to my eyes yesterday on the steps of our Capitol in Olympia. There was 67 hats represented the 6-7 troopers with hundreds and hundreds of years of experience that lost their jobs yesterday because of the tyrannical edicts of one man, Jay Inslee, and I think that's very, very sad. One other quick thought. I wish that you commissioners would consider passing a ordinance or a proclamation that Franklin County would not support an income tax. I know that that's happened in at least 9 other jurisdictions, and I would encourage you to consider that. Thank you.
I'm not aware of all of the things that happen in our community, but I'm surprised to hear of the intonations or the prejudice that seems to be among us. And certainly it's interesting the different perceptions that we get from what we've heard together collectively and how we interpret that and internalize it and then come back out with some kind of idea of hopefully what they're talking about. I spent 20 years in the military. And I'll tell you what, when you're out there with every color in the rainbow and you're fighting for your country, I'm really not thinking about my country. I'm thinking about the guy next to me. I'm thinking about the woman next to me helping me with taking care of those who are injured or needing care. I was in the medical field. And so my combat was basically in the CAT list, or taking combat casualties in. And the color didn't make any difference. And to see the majority of our town is literally, it's Hispanic. I'm surprised to hear that there's fear in voting when you don't have to do that in person. You do that from home, in the privacy of your own home. It's by mail. I don't understand that barrier. I need some help understanding that. The other issue is the fact that indeed if we don't somehow look at the population that literally covers all of Pasco and somehow make that even so that all can be represented, I'm not sure how that happens if you sequester East Pasco. How can my neighbors be represented? How can we get this equity, which I hate that word, but nevertheless, those who feel disenfranchised to feel better about the way the government's being run. And as far as Jay Inslee, I mean, I really feel disenfranchised being here on the east side. If you don't live in Pierce or King County, you might as well forget it as far as trying to elect a governor. So we know how it feels to be disenfranchised. You don't have to be a Latino to understand being disenfranchised. I love Pasco. I've been here only 23 years. It's a wonderful place to raise your family. And I hope that indeed we can, and indeed, at least here in our county, our city, resolve some of these issues and get back to living a peaceful and happy and productive life with each other. I know I do with my neighbors, whatever color they are. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Please come forward.
Yeah, I'm hearing some key words that may or may not fit exactly in the box that we're supposed to talk about, but I'm gonna make this real quick. I'd like to know if there's any soldiers or citizens from our county that have been left behind in Afghanistan. I'm gonna say my son got out of Afghanistan and being in that war zone, he's fortunate. But I'd like to know who is in this county that does no longer have any representatives. I'm worried about having representatives here based on these issues. But what about those people? They're over in a war zone, and they were, maybe some of them were for right here. I'd like to know who they are. I'd like a list. Another thing is, we need to make sure that the machine images from the last election are saved. Those are by the law required to be kept for 2 years. Those machine images. If they're not imaged, if they're not copied, then that's a crime. They can't be destroyed. Number three, I'll read something here from mandates. 2 comments. Vaccine mandates. We're hearing a lot about mandates. You know, for many, many years, I worked in the nuclear industry, related industries, Department of Energy. We always had to live under OSHA. OSHA, that's the enforcement arm. They are the police for safety and health. The question I have is, where's OSHA stand on these mandates? I don't see them. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't see OSHA standing up anywhere for this stuff. And they're the enforcement arm. Vaccine mandates, here's a little sentence. COVID-19 vaccines are not mandated under emergency use authorization. The Food and Drug Administration does not mandate vaccinations. However, whether a state, local government, or employer, for example, may require or mandate a COVID-19 vaccination is a matter of state or other applicable law. Employer vaccine mandates and approve of vaccination. Whether an employer may require or mandate COVID-19 vaccinations is a matter of state or other applicable law. If an employer requires employees to provide proof that they have received a COVID-19 vaccination from a pharmacy or their own healthcare provider, their employer cannot mandate that the employee provide any medical information as a part of proof. So the question is where in the state laws of Washington do we see mandates? Where are those laws? And how come OSHA seems to be in another world? You know, years ago when I'd work, if you made something stupid go on in your workplace, OSHA would come over and it's like, you need to correct that right now. Well, OSHA is in charge of your safety and your health. Well, this vaccine stuff, isn't that about safety and health? And they're nowhere to be found. So I think what I'm seeing, unless I'm proven wrong, is I see a governor that wiggles his lips and says, I'm going to mandate vaccinations from an emergency use only shot vaccine. It's not a vaccine, it's genetic. Actually, what it really is, if you look into it, it's a bioweapon. They already know it. They know Fauci funded it. They know Fauci was behind using remdesivir in New York City that killed all those people, and in Lombardy, Germany. Okay, Wuhan, we only had 3 cities in the whole world that had a big outbreak. I mean, it's outrageous. We don't have any mandates here that we have to follow that I know of. Now, if I'm wrong, I want you to tell me what they are, because I don't think there's any laws that represent that. Speak. Tell me.
Thank you, sir.
Oh.
Time went off a couple times. Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, before we move to adjourn, I'd like to have a moment for a quick comment. About 32 years ago, give or take a month, I arrived at the Pentagon as a young captain in the Air Force. And one of the very first things that I had the pleasure to do, and I'm remembering it this week, was meet the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, newly in the position, Colin Powell. Didn't get to speak to him long, just mentioned a passing interest in restoring old Volvos, which I knew was his hobby outside of uniform. But I think it's worth noting, we lost him yesterday to a combination of a cancer-riddled immune system and COVID. But he was the first African-American chairman for our U.S. military forces, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was the first African-American Secretary of State. He was born in Harlem to Jamaican immigrants here in this country lawfully. And those 2 Jamaican immigrants produced one of the finest soldiers of a generation. And I know that there are people in the audience here tonight who had the opportunity also to meet him and to even serve with him. Had much more contact in my brief interlude, but I just felt it was appropriate in this public setting to acknowledge his passing yesterday and publicly, I guess, thank him for his service to our country. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment before we adjourn? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.